Well, glad to be back on YouTube, boys and girls. And it seems that my home state of Louisiana just can't get its goddamn way out of the news. And it also cannot help but continuously making a fool of itself. And we saw this foolishness in the form of, I don't know, obligatory posting of some version, I don't know what, of the Ten Commandments. I said on television that given the storm season that we got coming up in the summer, I thought a Hail Mary would be more appropriate. But at any rate, this is where we are. Now, in Louisiana, we're going to have a little background information here because it's important because you got to understand the context. And people have been using religion in Louisiana politics before, and some people very effectively. As you remember from your earlier lectures, this tan part of that is the French part of the state. It's called Anglo-Saxon French Triangle. But basically, and it's still true to a large extent, if you live in this tan part, you're more likely to be Catholic, much more. And if you live in the white part, you're much more likely to be Protestant. And so Huey Long was a famous, to say the least, governor of Louisiana, was running for statewide office. And he was from right in the middle of the white part, Wynn Parish, Winfield. And he was campaigning in South Louisiana, and he had a stump speech. And he said, when I was a little boy, I used to hook up my horse and buggy, and I'd take my Catholic grandparents to Mass, and then I'd come back and let them off, and I'd go pick up my Baptist grandparents and take them to church. And a politician said to Huey, well, you've been holding out on us. I didn't know you had Catholic grandparents. He said, don't be a goddamn idiot. I didn't even have a horse. All right. So the idea, at least Huey was funny. He knew he was being a charlatan. And these people are anything, they're complete fools. And I'll explain to you just how big they're fools and tubes. And that's honestly been the history of the Louisiana legislature. Earl Long, who also was not above, I loved Earl, but he had a candidate running for governor, but there was a guy very famous, Hale Boggs, Mrs. Boggs, Lindy Boggs, great congresswoman from New Orleans, was an ambassador to the Vatican under President Clinton, the daughter Cokie Roberts, both Mrs. Boggs and Cokie now deceased, was a very famous news person in Washington, was on the ABC Sunday morning show forever. Well, anyway, Hale Boggs, the husband of Miss Lindy Boggs and the father, Cokie Roberts, was running for governor, and the rumor came out, and they started putting out that he was a part of a communist front organization when he was a student at Tulane Loyola. It was kind of common in that time that you would accuse somebody of being a communist. And of course, he was from New Orleans, and it was foreign enough for people. And so Earl, being the astute politician he was, said, I'm here, and he was a massive misdirection. He said, these people are saying that Hale Boggs is a communist and he belonged to these things, and I'm going to defend Hale Boggs because I think it's impossible for Hale Boggs to be a communist because everybody knows he's too good a Catholic to be a communist. So that would tell you about how things fit up in Louisiana. It's very important to remember as you go through and understand and learn about the history of our state, and particularly my native part of the state, which is South Louisiana, the more French Catholic part of the state. We really were not about hating. Crowley, Louisiana, which is right here in Acadia Parish. You can't get much more Acadiana than Acadia, can you? This was the home of Edwin W. Edwards, where he represented them in the state Senate and the United States Congress, was 4 times governor of Louisiana, and a good friend of mine, former United States Senator John Brough. In 1954, understand, 1954, Crowley had 2 black city councilmen. No one cared. I mean, can't tell you that the Cajun, but we are a pretty passive bunch. And we tend to, the average Cajun, I'm not against it, but it, what is now, they keep changing the name of the place. I think it's called UL, University of Louisiana. But back then it was called SLI, Southwestern Louisiana Institute. My mother actually went there. They were integrated in 1958. I mean, you say, oh my God, James Meredith is going to the South. What are we going to do? The LSU board shut the swimming pool down. Alabama had George Wallace stand the school board. It was integrated in the late 50s. No one gave a shit. Then I had a good close friend of mine from New Orleans. He's a Jewish guy named Gus Wild. Not a lot of Jews, and he lived in downtown Lafayette on St. John Street. And Gus had a theory, and I think he's right. He said the Cajuns didn't know how to hate until the Baptist preachers from Houston came and taught them. And I think there's some value. I think Paul Pressler sent some of his minions and said, well, you got these people here, they don't hate anybody, they mind their own business, they're really not against black people, they're not against anything. And boy, did they teach us well. Whew, oh my God, did they teach us well. And so here we are today. And of course, you have these, what I call fools and tools. You can look up this woman, Dottie Holton from Houghton, Haughton. It's up here by Bike Johnson country. And another, you ought to look at this beaut be interviewed on CNN. Her name is Lynn, last name starts with a V. If I tell you that these were intellectual toothpicks in a forest of, intellectual timber, I'd be given, they wouldn't even amount to a toothpick. Jeff Landry, the current governor, is St. Martin Parish. I think he might have gone to high school in Iberia, but right here in this part of the state. Now, what's really significant is there's a oak there. It's called the Evangeline Oak. It was a poem that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote called Evangeline, and it's about the Cajun migration to Louisiana and her lost lover, Gabriel. And I think it's a fairly highly regarded poem in American literature. And Long was running for governor, and it was an oak where I think Evangeline waited for Gabriel to come. And he gave a speech and talked about how children in Louisiana were still weeping because they didn't have textbooks and the people didn't have roads. And it was a very enlightened speech and was very connected to people. Unfortunately, without going too deep into history, he kind of started out with the right idea and ended up pretty much corrupted by power. But Huey never abused race. And his brother Earl, who I literally one of the most influential people in my life, and one of the people that I really liked the most, he the race thing drove him crazy. And there were people back then in Louisiana, and these were some odious ass villains. We'll pull up a picture of a guy from up here, Mike Johnson country, Clayton Parish, Summerfield, Louisiana, by the name of Willie Raynack, who Earl called Pinhead Willie. And look at his picture. He actually had a goddamn pinhead. And then there was another guy. He was right here where the river goes out, Leander Perez. And before he became a bigot, I guess maybe he always was, he was a big, long guy. The famous story about I think it was gubernatorial election. And late in the election night, Huey Long said, somebody call the son of a bitch and tell him to stop counting. We already won the election. And he would just hold out whatever votes he thought his candidate needed in Plaquemines to get him over the top to be governor. He came on to be one of the more odious segregationists. And, we had first-class villains back there. And one of my favorite of all of the South Louisiana people was actually from Abbeville, Louisiana, which is in Vermilion Parish, by the name of Dudley J. LeBlanc called Kuzan Dud. If you want to entertain yourself, look up Hadacol, Hadacol, in Wikipedia. It was one of the largest selling consumer products in the United States in like 1949. They had a whole caravan, had Bob Hope and Hank Williams and God knows who was on there. And the way that you got admission is you got a box top, a Hadacol. Of course, the FDA did some analysis on it. It was nothing but alcohol and syrup. He sold it as some kind of panacea. I don't think it really hurt anybody. And Dudley was a first-class salesman. And I don't think there's much evidence that Dudley was ever prejudiced against anybody. I mean, he was a huckster. I mean, he's a hustler. And, he served in the legislature for a long, long time. A kind of colorful guy. Now, it used to be the 7th. I don't think we even have 7 congressional districts anymore. But this congressional district, South Louisiana, from being represented by people like John Breaux and Edward Edwards, who were, brilliant men, the current congressman from that district is a gentleman by the name of Clay Higgins. And I'm going to end any argument that you might have. Well, he can't be as bad as Margaret Taylor Greene, or he can't be as stupid as this. Actually, he is. And I'm going to end this fucking argument right now. Clay Higgins is the only human being in the world that has ever been sanctioned by the Anne Frank Foundation. Wait a minute, James, you're making this crap up. No, I'm not making it up. I'm telling you that he is the only human being in the entire world that was ever sanctioned by the Anne Frank Foundation. And if I were to tell you this guy is it'd be a contest. Is he as dumb as a box of rocks or a second pint of Coke? I don't know. But so now you have these, and Jeff Landry is hardly an intellectual. I mean, we're going from John Bell, who was head of the honor council, into the student body at United States Military Academy at West Point, and graduated from LSU Law. Was one of the best governors I've ever seen in my life. To this, and we had the lady from Horton, Dodie Horton, I think her name is. And we had the lady from Greenville Springs right here, and Jeff Landry, and as I say, they tools and fools. Why are they doing this? Understand what's going on. This is a opening salvo in an attempt by a group of people, very many of them, Louis Woody Jenkins, I've talked about, Tony Perkins, a guy named Rod Dreher, who's really big. They're all Paul Pressler. Paul Pressler's now in hell. He died a week or 10 days ago. I don't think it took him very long to get there. Louisiana Christian, Joe Aguilar, all of these people, Leonard Leo, Samuel, look at the flag that Martha Ann, what they're trying to do is instill Christian nationalism in this country, which basically says that the Constitution was written by, for, and about Christians, and that this country has religious foundations, and it is only to protect Christians from discrimination. I think if you're a Baptist, you can criticize a Presbyterian. I don't know if Catholics are part of the deal, but I suspect we are, because Leonard Leo is one. But it doesn't apply to anybody else. And the 10 Commandments, now, in the opinion of most people, would certainly be mine, the most elegant and greatest Protestant cleric in the history of the United States is E.Z. Roger Williams, who was a Baptist preacher in Rhode Island in the Clone Times, who said that forced worship was a stench in God's nostrils. All right? That's right. Roger Williams, the great theologian, the great cleric, said that forced worship is a stench in God's nostrils. But again, you got these clowns from St. Martinville, Greenville Springs. They're being used, and they'll discard of them. Clay Higgins would know. don't get me please started on this. And what I wish that we would do, and I'm asked our people to roll excerpts, because we actually kind of know what the founding fathers or what people of that time thought of. And maybe as we look through our history books, we might look up a minor historical figure of the Revolutionary War and early American government. You may have heard of him, George Washington. And we're going to scroll the words that George Washington wrote to the Touro Synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island. And I don't think he thought that Christianity had any more exalted place than anybody else in the United States. But I'll let Brother George's words speak for themselves, because again, we'll have to find out what side we own. Whose side did we pick? Or did we pick Clay Higgins, or did we pick George Washington? Who's going to be our inspiration? What are we going to tell the children? All right? Are we going to force him, or we're going to put some version, I don't know which one, ahead of the United States Constitution, or are they separate documents from each other? I know what George Washington thought, and I'm on Team Washington. I'm almost sure I know to the nth degree what Abraham Lincoln would thought, because he thought all these clerics were, again, fools and tools. And so that's what you have in Louisiana legislature. Now, Earl, they asked Earl if he bought the legislature, and he said, no, it's cheaper to rent. I don't even think you can rent them now. I just think they're fundamentally that stupid. I think that greed is not the thing that motivates the majority. I'm sure you got, like any people, you may be clear, you got some decent people and hardworking people in the Louisiana legislature. I sincerely doubt they in the minority. And don't ever kid yourself. This is not about the freaking 10 Commandments. This is about Christian nationalism. And what they're doing, and I'm going to close this lecture, this is something that really fucking pisses me off, and it should you. And if any of y'all that listen to this are really good lawyers and ideas, they're funding all of these crazy ass private religious schools. So I'm a taxpayer in the state of Louisiana. And I find it offensive to the nth degree that I'm paying a second grader to be taught that the earth is 5,000 years old, which is just a fucking lie. All right. And they want me to pay for that. They want other people to pay for that. There has got to be some kind of constitutional grounds or history or tradition of the country that we don't have to pay to tell children lies. It's not going to do any good, because they're going to find out, assuming that they have, unless they Mike Johnson, who for all I know, believes this shit. All right. But unless you're at that level of stupidity, you know the earth is not 5,000 years old. So be on guard. We'll have to do more lectures. Unfortunately, these sons of bitches don't let me get away from my map and my explanation for what's going on right now, because this is going to continue to go on. And I can assure you, if Trump wins and he names a replacement for Sotomayor, it's game, set, match. There's no more Constitution. There's no more religious freedom. We're now going to officially move into a theocracy. And so, and I hear young people say, well, I don't feel like I have a stake in this. Well, you got a hell of a stake coming up. So let's everybody remember what's really, really at stake here. What this is really, really about. And it's about imposing a theocracy on other people, and the fools and tools that are being used for this opening salvo, this Fort Sumter, Pearl Harbor, whatever you want to call it, is in Louisiana, and they're being exploited by people who really have what I think is an odious and insidious agenda for the United States of America. So let's fight this thing like our country depended on it, because it does. Let's remember the words of Roger Williams, and let's team up and have George Washington in our huddle. Thank you very much.